One day on the job, he was a machine operator, or really a saw operator, operating an industrial-sized saw machine, and which was basically operated through a computer system. And out of nowhere, an 18-inch steel diameter saw blade separated from the saw. It ricocheted 2 or 3 times inside the system. It escaped the system, came out and hit him in the leg, tearing through his muscle ligaments and snapped his femur in half.
Welcome to the Law Talk Podcast, where we take you behind the curtains of a successful personal injury law firm. This season, the Hollis Wright team of attorneys will discuss a lot of topics sure to be pertinent to you and your family. You'll hear about current events as well as Alabama legislation impacting the legal industry and you. You'll hear about steps involved in a personal injury case and even hear an exciting case study involving a client, his injuries, and his ultimate success. You'll hear how the work performed by the attorneys at Hollis Wright and in the legal field helps to keep corporate America in check. Before we dive in, a little background. Hollis Wright & Clay is a law firm located in Birmingham, Alabama, with 10 seasoned trial lawyers on staff, a firm built on experience, excellence, and decades of incredible results. Having a seat and chatting with the Carter Clay. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's been too long.
It has been a while, but looks like things are well. I was trying to track how many attorneys at Hollis right now?
About 9 or 10, yeah.
9 or 10, okay.
Yeah.
And
we just hired another female attorney.
Yeah, so the firm is growing.
Yeah,
continues to grow. And you have been here now for how long?
Since April of 2013. So a little over 10 years, 11 years or so.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations. Interesting what we're going to do today, because this is where the podcast gives you the ability to do something like what we're going to do. I love the idea of a case study, and there's a particular case study that we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk in generalities and concepts because I felt like it would be better to hone in on a particular case that I had handled in the past. And just to kind of give you some time perspective here, this was actually a case that I handled about 15 years ago.
Okay.
So it's not something that I recently handled, but it's something that still stays with me. And we'll get into more of the details of why it has stayed with me for this long. It's really just had a positive impact on me personally and professionally. And I thought it would be a good story to talk about and to highlight the legal aspects of product liability law in Alabama.
So who is DeWaun King? Kind of tell us about him and what happened. What's his story?
So DeWaun is 15 years older now than he was when I handled his case, but at the time he was about a 30-year-old man that was working for a manufactured housing plant in Mobile, Alabama. He did not have much in the way of education. He was pretty much going to be a manual laborer for his entire life. He had a little bit of a speech impediment, and he was working for a manufactured housing facility that built wooden trusses for manufactured houses. So the part of the manufactured house that holds up the roof. Mm-hmm. And one day on the job, he was a machine operator, or really a saw operator, operating an industrial-sized saw machine, and which was basically operated through a computer system. And out of nowhere, an 18-inch steel diameter saw blade separated from the saw. It ricocheted 2 or 3 times inside the system. It escaped the system, came out and hit him in the leg, tearing through his muscle ligaments and snapped his femur in half. And so just to kind of give you some perspective on this, David, this is not the actual saw blade itself. This is just an exemplar image of what this type of saw blade looked like. And imagine emphasizing the 18-inch diameter aspect of this. So this was a big, round
It's a big old saw.
saw blade. Yeah, absolutely. Did a lot of damage to his leg, snapped his femur in half. If it had not ricocheted around 2 or 3 times in the system before coming out, he probably would have lost his leg. But he sustained a significant injury, and we ultimately represented him in that case.
In legal parlance, I guess this would be a product liability case.
That's absolutely correct.
So kind of let's dive into product liability 101. Help us give us some guardrails.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think to really make this subject very impactful for the listener or the viewer here, it's important to understand just sort of the basics of product liability law. And I'm going to simplify this in the interest of time. But essentially in product liability law, you're going to be dealing with 3 potential types of claims.
Okay.
You're going to be dealing with a design defect, a manufacturing defect, or a failure to warn. All right, now let's unpack those 3 potential claims. Every product out there, to some extent, is going to have design specifications or design drawings concerning that particular product, typically by a qualified, or hopefully a qualified, engineer or person with some type of technical background that can put these designs together, okay? Now, if you are going after a design defect, essentially what you're saying is that the design of the product was defective. Well, what does that mean? Well, essentially what that means is that there is a safer alternative design to the product. In other words, you could have designed this product in such a way that it would have been safer and it would have eliminated the danger and hazard that my client experienced. That's a design defect.
Okay.
Manufacturing defect is that there's nothing wrong with the design of the product. It's that through the manufacturing process, your manufacturing process was defective in some way, and as a result of that, the product was manufactured inconsistently with the design.
Okay.
It did not comply with the design.
Right.
That's a manufacturing defect. A failure to warn defect claim is that there are certain inherent dangers and hazards with the product and the use of the product, and you should have warned the end user or the consumer about those dangers so that they could use the product in a safer way, and the failure to warn them caused a particular injury.
Are those like if you buy a new product, it'll come with a sticker on it and a warning? Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
You've often used a phrase that I want you to clarify for me: the hierarchy of safety engineering. Hierarchy of safety engineering. So what is that, and how does that play a role in product liability cases?
So that is the analysis and sort of the critical thinking that I go through and a lot of lawyers go through that handle these types of cases. And what that means in simplistic terms is that when I'm evaluating a case, and when you're really looking at not just a lawyer evaluating it, but if an engineer is doing their work the way they should be doing it, when they're looking at the design of the product and they're going through the research and development trying to come up with the design, what they should be looking for are these things. Are there hazards and dangers associated with the design of the product? All right. If there are, then they need to be looking for ways to reasonably eliminate those dangers and hazards. All right. Okay. That's the first level of the safety hierarchy of engineering. Now, if you cannot design out the danger or hazard, then you should secondly look for ways to guard against the danger or hazard from causing an injury. All right. If you're not able to guard against it, then the last component to that is you should be warning about the danger or hazard. Now, that's conceptual. Let's bring it home with some real world examples.
Okay.
Do you like candles?
I do like candles.
All right.
Yeah.
You ever noticed how the lighters have those features where you got to pull the trigger and push the button? Do you know why that is?
I bet there's been a problem in the past.
All right. Medicine bottles. Do you know how you got to child-proof medicine bottles? That's another aspect. Chainsaws. All right. Chainsaws have all kinds of guards on them.
Sometimes it's very difficult to start a chainsaw.
So think about those products in terms of this hierarchy of safety engineering. Yeah. Let's take a lighter, for example. You can't eliminate the danger or hazard of the lighter, which is fire, right, without destroying the usefulness of the lighter, The lighter is designed to light things, right? And so if you eliminated that danger, you would eliminate the usefulness of the lighter's function. So then you have to look at it and say, well, I can't design out that danger. Now, can I guard against it? All right, well, actually, I can guard against a child or somebody inadvertently lighting it by putting in these safety features. Same thing with a medicine bottle. I can design out or think about what's under your kitchen sink, bleach, Clorox, poisonous things. They make those tops in such a way that children can't open them. That's called guarding against the hazard, all right? Now, we're going to talk about a case in a minute that really hits home the point of a failure to warn, so I'll hold that for a minute. But I think it gives you an idea of what that hierarchy is all about.
All right, let's take a break. But when we come back, I'm curious, you certainly, I can sense you're passionate about this. I'm curious why you're so passionate about this. We'll get into that.
All right.
Let's take a break.
I'm passionate about it, so I wanted to jump right into it, Dave.
You're just pouncing. That's right. All right. More on this subject. Our chat with Carter Clay from the law firm of Hollis Wright continues after this quick break.
Hollis Wright has assembled one of the best trial teams in the state of Alabama. A team that doesn't quit, a team that never backs down, a team that has the skills to take your case all the way. Let Hollis Wright tell your comeback story.
Victims think they're not strong enough to take on a corporation or an industry after an accident. And I'm here to tell you, with us at your side, you are. Don't be intimidated by anyone or anything. Let Hollis Wright tell your comeback story.
You know you're getting your money's worth whenever you deal with, you're talking about candles, chainsaws, lighters.
Oh, there's more.
I mean, you could go on and on. Now, I've known you a little while, more than a decade, I guess, and this is a subject matter that you just your voice, the inflection goes up. I can see you're passionate about this. Why is this subject matter so passionate?
Because for me, after having done this for 25 years, I find these cases to be the most intellectually challenging and competitive cases that I handle. And what I mean by that is that every case truly is different. It's not like a lot of car wreck cases, rear end collision, T-bone collisions. Those cases are great. We resolve a lot of those cases, but these cases are always different and you're always learning something. I tell people when I handle a product liability case, by the time I get to trial, I want to know more about the engineering side of the product at issue than the actual engineers that designed the product.
So you do a deep dive.
You absolutely have to do a deep dive in these cases to be successful. And just to give you some examples of the types of cases and the experience that I have in these cases, I've handled crossbow cases involving defective crossbows where a lady was injured her eye and was blind in an eye. I handled Yamaha Rhino cases, utility terrain vehicles, where they were rolling over and they had lateral instability issues and there were no doors on there where people's lower extremities were going out and getting crushed. You probably didn't know this about me, David, but I am actually somewhat of a quasi-expert on hairstyling for African-American females.
I could have guessed that.
You could, I figured as much.
That checks
represented a lady that was styling her hair one night about to go out using a oven and a curling iron, not electric iron itself, but you would literally put this curling iron inside this oven that would heat up to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Think about that.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
That's twice as hot as your cooking oven at home.
That made it to market.
Made it to market. She's styling her hair. As she takes the curling iron out, unbeknownst to her, it's got a flame on the tip of it. She puts it to her hair to curl her hair. Due to the hair spritz that she was using, the hairspray, she goes up in flames. Terrible third-degree burns to her body. We pursued a product liability claim against the manufacturer. That was a failure to warn claim. Okay, they had absolutely no warnings on the product itself to indicate that residue buildup of the spritz, Vaseline, and hair care products could actually ignite. And we challenged them on that. We were able to successfully resolve that case. I've handled a whole host of other product liability cases as well, but each case is different and you've got to immerse yourself into the engineering.
So that level of experience you brought to DeWaun King's case, let's kind of go back to him. What are the details of that incident? And if you can, trace us back to how you became involved with DeWaun.
Yes, so that's a great question. I was practicing here in Birmingham. The case actually came to me through my father's law firm, Clay Massey and Associates in Mobile. They were actually initially hired. They referred the case to me. That's how I got involved in the case. And I had a little bit of expertise at that time in handling product liability cases. Again, it was almost 15 years ago, and we investigated it. We hired engineers to take a look at it and decided that we would take a chance and pursue it on behalf of DeWaun.
How did you know this case had merit?
Well, that's an interesting part of this practice, is you don't always know for sure at the time you file the lawsuit. Remember, there's a lot of information and material that we cannot get our hands on until we file the lawsuit.
Okay.
It's not like I'm just going to call the manufacturer up and say, hey, will you send me your design specifications? We've got to have the backing of the court to require them to produce those items. But
is that when you would like subpoena information?
that's right.
Is that what's
but you
happening?
can't do any of that until you actually file the lawsuit.
Okay.
So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll talk to engineers before we file the lawsuit. We will try and get as much information as we can through other sources. We may talk to witnesses of the incident. But the reality of it in DeWaun's situation is that saw blades should not be separating from the saws themselves unless something is fundamentally wrong. And so that was the main impetus for us just going ahead, filing the lawsuit, because we felt like there had to be something there. So once we filed the lawsuit, we can engage in discovery. We can send out interrogatories, requests for production. We can get information from the manufacturer or the defendant that will help us build our case. The real turning point in the case is that we had asked the manufacturer, we had had some indication that the manufacturer had been called and dispatched to Mobile to come to do an investigation. So you can imagine the manufacturing housing facility. They didn't want to turn these machines back on. They had multiple saws from this manufacturer. They were scared to death for their employees to turn these saws back on. So they immediately called an engineer from the manufacturer and said, you've got to get down here and take a look at these machines and figure out what happened here. So we filed the lawsuit. We asked them to produce any investigative report that they had generated as a result of their inspection. They objected to it, claiming what we call attorney-client privilege, work product doctrine. This was all done in anticipation of litigation, et cetera. But they made a critical mistake. The mistake they made is that they shared the report with the manufactured housing company in Mobile.
Okay.
Once they did that, they waived whatever privilege was attached to it. So all we did was we turned around and we issued a subpoena to the employer in Mobile, and where we argued that, look, you've waived the privilege. We ultimately get the report, and I'm assuming you probably want to know what that report said.
I do, and that's the thrilling conclusion of how this turned out.
Well, so
we'll have that.
Huh?
You want to go to break?
Well, we could go to break if the timing is right.
All right. Let's go to break here, because we want to know how things turned out. How did things turn out for DeWaun? We'll find that out after the break. Stay with us.
The attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best: help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Welcome back in. Talking about this case, a case study, which is, I love the concept of kind of how we're doing this here. DeWaun King, a client of yours from about 15 years ago, and you're kind of walking us through this case. Before we get to the conclusion, kind of develop this out for us, the steps of DeWaun's case and how kind of the case came to be and was developed.
Yeah, so as a lawyer, we always love when we can get what we call hot documents.
Okay.
This was sort of a seminal moment in the case when I got my hands on the investigative report that the manufacturer had generated by their engineers when they went and did their inspection. And what the report revealed is that the countersink holes, so the holes that the bolts go through to attach the saw blade to the saw itself are called countersink holes. Those countersink holes were oversized. They were outside the design specifications, hence manufacturing defect. Right. And what happened is that because they were oversized, through the course of time, there was excessive vibration on what we call the neck or the heads of those bolts. And it wore the bolts down to where basically it cut the neck of the bolt off. And once that happened, the saw blade separates from the saw machine, ricochets around, comes out, and hits DeWaun King in the leg. So the report itself established for me the manufacturing defect in the case. Now, through 25 years of experience, nobody ever rolls over, unfortunately, on these product liability cases. Right. We had to take a lot of depositions. We had to continue to develop the case. What we found out is that the manufacturer did not have a very good quality control system in place to check or determine the size of those countersink holes before they sent it out to be integrated into the final product. And so that was something that we had to continue to develop in the case. We had an engineer in the case to come in that we hired to talk about those countersink holes, to talk about the problems that it created, to talk about the excessive vibration, and basically explain how this happened.
All right. So how did it end up? Did you win, settle?
Well, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we did not settle the case, and that's what was one of the interesting aspects of this case was the case probably should have settled. We mediated the case. We negotiated. The real issue in the case is they didn't think DeWaun King was hurt as badly as we did. He was hurt for sure, but they thought he could go back to work. He made a pretty good recovery physically from the incident. They probably wanted to pay around $300,000 to $500,000 to settle the claim. We thought the case was worth more money than that. Right. And so we went to trial on that case. We actually tried that case in front of Sarah Stewart, who was a circuit court judge at that time, who has been on the Alabama Supreme Court the last several years and will likely be the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court in the not too distant future. She was actually the presiding judge on that case. We tried the case for about a week and a half. The case tried really, really well. I think we did a good job. We got a $1.6 million verdict on behalf of DeWaun. And it turned out really well, and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, and I bet DeWaun is as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why did you want to share DeWaun's story with us
Well,
today?
the one aspect of the case that really stands out to me that I'm really proud of in terms of just being rewarding and fulfilling part of the job that we do is DeWaun's wife was working and couldn't be there when the verdict was read. And he was out in the hallway. I was with him. He was calling her on his cell phone, and his voice was trembling. His hands were shaking. He was getting choked up, and he told her what the verdict was. And man, it just really stayed with me. Yeah,
it's with you today as
yeah.
well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Moments like that, boy, they mark your life. So what is, as we kind of wrap up, what is something about a product liability and product liability cases